The first day of NBA free agency is always so insane with how hectic and chaotic it is, with shams and woj bombs coming out in droves, players signing with new teams, re-signing with their current teams. You're getting updates by the hour on where guys are going, and it's especially crazy in those first few minutes after free agency begins, when somehow miraculously you have these multiple million-dollar deals getting negotiated and agreed upon in the first 2 minutes of free agency, since, players and teams aren't allowed to talk to each other about contracts until free agency begins. But inevitably, somehow you always have multiple deals come through in the first 10 minutes of free agency opening. It's really ridiculous. The NBA just needs to do away with the tampering rule, because we all know every team does it, and yet they only punish a few when tampering actually occurs. But anyway, we're not here to debate that. The point is, in just the first day, and not even really a full day, but the first night of free agency, we saw a ton of movement throughout the league. Some transactions were expected, and then others, not so much. So in this video, I'll be going over some of the biggest surprise signings of the offseason thus far, and I'll also just give a quick recap on all the moves in a condensed format in case you don't want to sift through all the transactions. As always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, at a high level, I think the biggest thing for me that was a surprise across all of the signings today compared to last year is that you actually had quite a few players sign with different teams. Last offseason, for the most part, free agency was relatively boring, with a lot of players just re-upping with their incumbent team, and a lot of that was because most teams didn't have cap space and really only had room to re-sign their current free agents. Now, that was still the case this offseason, and not a lot of teams having cap space to sign free agents outright, but with the mid-level exception increasing, teams using trade exceptions and biannual exceptions, and of course, the increase in the overall tax, luxury tax threshold, etc., it afforded teams a little more flexibility to bringing in outside players. Now, on an individual transaction level, as far as surprises go, the first player we've got to start with is Fred VanVleet. Now, it wasn't a surprise that he left Toronto. I think we all kind of knew that was coming with the way the season ended. We knew he wanted a big contract. The Raptors were tentative to give him one. He declines his player option, and at that point, the writing was on the wall. He was going elsewhere. He wasn't declining his option to re-sign with the Raptors on a bigger, longer-term deal. So that wasn't a surprise. What was a surprise, though, was not only the amount for which he signed to, a max contract of 3 years, $130 million, an average annual salary of over $43 million, but the amount aside, it was also the team that he signed with, the Houston Rockets. Fred VanVleet signing with one of the worst teams in the league last season, a ton of young players, a team that is in a complete rebuild. Fred VanVleet decided to join the Rockets. This is basically I don't really care about winning, I just want my money signing. And good on Fred. He got his bag. It's what he wanted. A lot of people were saying there was no way that he would get a max level deal. Well, he got it. Is he worth that much? Absolutely not. Fred VanVleet is a hell of a player. He did have somewhat of a down season, though, was pretty up and down in terms of his overall consistency, and also he's going to turn 30 years old in this upcoming season. Yeah, it's only a 3-year deal. It's not like you signed him to a 5-year max contract, but man, over $40 million for Fred VanVleet. And for a team to sign a guy who doesn't fit their timeline at all is good enough also of a player to where he's probably going to win you too many games to secure a high lottery pick as well. Yeah, this was just odd to me. Now, to be clear, the new CBA does require teams to spend at least 90% of their salary cap, and the Rockets going into free agency were a team that had the most cap space in the league, so they needed to add money on their books, and a lot of it actually. So I get it, in that way it kind of makes sense, just not sure I would have handed a max deal to VanVleet. I feel like there could have been better options, way better options to spend your money if you have the cash to blow. Another surprise, Jeremy Grant re-signing with the Blazers to the tune of 5 years, $160 million. This is surprising for a couple reasons. One, by the Blazers re-signing Jeremy Grant, and especially at that value, it all but guarantees the Blazers are in fact going to keep Damian Lillard and use this as a piece to build around him. Now, I don't think that's the right way to do it, but even Lillard said himself he wanted to keep Grant on the team. And while it's not a surprise that the Blazers are going to make this mistake of trying for one last all-in push to put together a contending team around Lillard, it is surprising that they would prioritize having Grant being one of those pieces, and not just paying him a sizable amount, but on a 5-year deal. It would be one thing if you're paying him over $30 million a year on 2 or 3 years, but 5 years for Jeremy Grant. Dude is also going to be turning 30 in this upcoming season. At least sign him to a shorter term deal in the event things don't work out with Lillard and he asks out. Then you've got this big contract of Jeremy Grant on your hands while trying to rebuild, and possibly a very hard contract to trade when he has that much guaranteed coming to him over the next 5 years. Other surprises, another max contract actually, Desmond Bane. Look, I love Desmond Bane. I think he's an incredible player, plays tough, gives maximum effort, and has improved every season that he's been in the NBA. But come on now, signing him to a max extension, and an early extension I might add, like the Grizzlies didn't have to extend him now. They could have waited until he became a restricted free agent. We've seen teams make this mistake before in giving out large contract extensions to rookie scale deals early, like Jordan Poole, in hopes they can lock them up earlier and not risk losing them in the following offseason. But then sometimes it backfires, so I'm not surprised that the Grizzlies extended him. That was to be expected, but at a max contract? Nah, that was a stretch. Like, Tyrese Halliburton received a max contract from the Pacers, and while some might think that's a bit of a stretch, you can see that Tyrese Halliburton has superstar potential, franchise player potential in his future. With how dominant he was this past season, already was selected as an all-star. Desmond Bane, I don't see that as much. Another surprise to me was the Nets re-signing Cam Johnson to a 4-year, $108 million deal. I wasn't surprised by the Nets re-signing him, as I think he was considered to be a value piece in that Kevin Durant trade deal, but the figure is pretty high for someone like Cam Johnson and his caliber. Over $25 million a year for Cam Johnson, and I don't know, maybe I just need to get used to the new salary cap increases and the new CBA to understand that these are no longer massive figures. It just seems like it wasn't that long ago where someone who got paid more than $25 million a year was reserved for the best players in the league. It also was a little surprising because there was speculation whether the Nets would actually keep Cam Johnson or potentially look to execute a sign and trade, and sure enough, he's one of the first free agents to sign on a sizable deal. Some people may not have found this one as surprising, but it was to me, and that's the Mavs re-signing Kyrie Irving to a 3-year, $126 million deal. I really wasn't sure if he was going to be coming back. Like, with the way things went down with the Mavericks season and how it ended, missing the play-in entirely, crumbling at the end of the year, even with the addition of Kyrie, the fit and chemistry was off. It just was not good for that organization. Most knew it was going to be a disaster in the making, and while you don't want the guy to just walk for nothing after you traded for him and gave up assets to get him, I really thought Kyrie was just going to bounce. I thought he was going to be the one that actually picked up one of those big bags from Houston rather than Fred VanVleet and just do him, because that's kind of what Kyrie does in general. He does what he wants. And if you don't like it, you can get out. So yes, I'm surprised that he re-upped with the Mavericks. And while Kyrie is still one of the more talented players in the NBA, over $40 million a year at his age, with his history as well of not really playing the whole season and all of the other drama and baggage and headache that comes with Kyrie, it's a lot. It's a pretty big gamble to be throwing that money his way. And also, with the contract you have with Luka as well, combined with all of your other guaranteed money, you're coming very close to that first luxury tax apron under the new CBA. Another one was Kyle Kuzma, 4 years, $102 million. The figure I'm not surprised by. I think we all knew that Kuzma was going to be getting a nice payday after the last couple of seasons that he's had, but I did not expect him to re-sign with the Washington Wizards. Not after all the moves they made in trading away Bradley Beal, Porzingis, subsequently Chris Paul, stockpiling all of the draft capital. I mean, they're rebuilding. And I thought they were going to be committing to the rebuild, but then they re-signed Kuzma, who doesn't fit their timeline anymore. And now is another big salary you have on your books along with Jordan Poole, which limits your flexibility to bring in other free agents. Granted, very possible they sign Kuzma to this deal, the deal that he wants. It's still a tradable contract for his age and production. Maybe they just look to trade him closer to the deadline to get some value in return in a team that is maybe looking for that one piece to get them over the top into title contention. Oh, also Bruce Brown, 2 years, $45 million with the Pacers. That was a surprise on both fronts in terms of the contract amount and the team. The Pacers, of all teams, they're going to bring in Bruce Brown for that much money, over $20 million a year. I mean, damn, I know he had a good playoff run with the Nuggets, but that's a lot of money, especially for a team that is rebuilding and a player who probably isn't going to be part of the future. Some of these other ones weren't as surprising, but not as big as the ones that I just mentioned. Draymond Green re-signing with the Warriors, I think we all knew that was going to happen, but the figure and contract length is what got me. 4 years, $100 million. Draymond is 33. You're giving him $25 million a year and giving him a player option on the final year of that deal, when he's 36 is something I think the Warriors are going to regret. I get it, you pay for loyalty, you pay for being a big piece of 4 championships for that organization, but at the same time, at some point, the Warriors have to start thinking about their future and hamstringing themselves by offering these large loyalty contracts to their big 3 that pay them out into their late 30s is going to be regrettable in my opinion. Rui Hachimura re-signs with the Lakers, 3 years, $54 million. Kind of a lot for Rui. He had a nice run with the Lakers after they traded for him at the deadline. But when you compare it to some of his other draft counterparts, one particular in Kobe White, who got a 3-year, $33 million extension, and when you compare their overall impact against each other, yeah, it makes it look like it was a bit of an overpay on the part of the Lakers. Dennis Schroeder signing a 2-year deal with the Raptors for $26 million, essentially a mid-level deal. Normally, I wouldn't be surprised by this if it wasn't the Raptors, though. I just don't really know what this team is doing. I mean, after losing Fred VanVleet, I'm shocked they're not looking to go on a fire sale and rebuild. Instead, they re-signed Jakob Poeltl to a big contract, 4 years, $80 million, which is fine. Poeltl is a great player, a very underrated big in the NBA. But what is their direction? Are they just running it back and now you bring in Schroeder on that deal to replace VanVleet? I just see this team imploding by the trade deadline, and I just don't understand why they're not just imploding now. Joe Ingles, 2-year deal with the Magic. That was a little odd. Not sure how he fits with what they're trying to do there. Gives them shooting, but doesn't really make sense for their timeline. Gabe Vincent, 3 years, $33 million, signing with the Lakers. That's actually a pretty good pickup for the Lakers to give them more shooting. I personally thought Vincent was going to go for more than that, and the Lakers getting him for below the mid-level is actually solid. Anyway, those are really the biggest surprises to me. Some were more surprising than others. I don't think that I'm going to be able to go through all of these other signings. Some were pretty insignificant as well, but either way, once free agency is all but wrapped up, I'm going to do a couple videos on the best signings of the offseason as well as the worst signings of the offseason. Let me know in the comments if you think we already have some contenders here just from the first day of free agency. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.